Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be talking about the Chinese form of democracy compared to Western forms of democracy. And in prior videos, we've talked about how the Western form of democracy is extremely procedural and it's really just a show. Whereas Chinese democracy is far more substantive, and we've backed this up with a ton of evidence, whether it's optimism of people in China versus the West, or satisfaction with the current system for people in China versus the West, or life satisfaction metrics, or the amount of high speed rail in each of the countries. There's a lot of different ways that you can quantify whether a country is doing a good job or not. And we can see pretty definitively that America is just not doing a good job, no matter what metric we're actually looking at. And because of that, and for other reasons, we tend to think of Western democracy as procedural, while Chinese democracy is more substantive because they're actually meeting the needs, they're actually satisfying the people, which is the entire intent behind democracy. So let's read on about what they say here. The fifth question is democracy procedural or substantive? Classical theorists of Western democracy once put forward the theory of substantive democracy. However, today, Western democracy is what Schumpeter called modern procedural democracy, where politicians compete for popular consent to rule through a specific electoral process. But even if the process is perfectly legal, it may result in a situation that is substantively pointless or even at odds with its original aim. Okay, so the Western system does not elect good officials. It doesn't elect people who are actually going to be qualified to do the job. But it is an entirely legal system, and that's what they're saying here. So we have an example here. For example, one indicator of the poor quality of American democracy is that people have almost no influence on policy, and that competitive elections are little more than a psychological placebo. Another indicator is the prevalence of short-term and superficial politics, where politicians focus on short-term issues, and the democratic system fails to address long-term fundamental problems. And you can see this with things like high-speed rails. It's something that doesn't have an immediate financial benefit to the people making them. It is something that is long-term that benefits the nation as a whole. To have people able to travel all across the country easily in order to access various jobs, in order to access various goods, et cetera, et cetera. You can also see this in things like communication technology, where places like Huawei or organizations like Huawei in China were doing a great job with implementing 5G communication technology, not only in their own country, but in other countries as well. And the United States just couldn't compete, so they did their best to sanction Huawei and tried to destroy the company. And the United States just doesn't care about that as much. If the United States wanted, people could have more access to 5G. They could have access to better transportation technology, et cetera, et cetera. But they don't care because oftentimes these things don't have necessarily an immediate profit. They're more of a public good. And in order to have that public good, in a Western democracy, you have to have there has to be some way of profiting from it. And unfortunately, some of these things don't have an immediate profit. And so we see here that things like poor infrastructure, and don't get me started on that because I'm from the Rust Belt, I'm from Western Pennsylvania, and really the thing is, they quit caring about that region of the country when steel manufacturing and coal quit being a thing. It quit being as prevalent in the Rust Belt. And so because of that, they just quit caring about the infrastructure within that part of the country. There's massive income and wealth inequality, and it's just gotten worse over time. Growing levels of government debt. So the government debt has been soaring, and they just keep printing more and more money. Shootings, racial conflict, and other problems that limit America's long-term development. And we see that in terms of racial conflict, that's gotten worse over time. So it was really good in the 90s. And then after the 90s, people just quit liking each other. They quit getting along. They quit trusting each other. A lot more hostility nowadays. So we see here Chinese democracy is precisely the unification of procedural and substantive democracy, with procedural democracy placed in service of substantive democracy. Okay, so they're just saying which is more important? Is it the procedure of pretending to be a democracy, or is it actually performing the things that democracies are supposed to perform? They say that performing what a democracy is actually supposed to perform is the most important thing. The form in which popular sovereignty is realized is not through an empty social contract that transforms power from a divine mandate to the people's will, but through an intermediary that acts as a stand-in for the people, the Communist Party of China. See here? The CPC has become the highest form of organization of the Chinese people and the highest expression of their will. Self-rule by the people through an intermediary of a stand-in, i.e. the party, is based on a subject-object dialectic relationship between the party and the people. The two are both subject and object of the other. So they're saying that it's a back and forth exchange. First of all, the people are masters of the house, which the Chinese talk about a lot here. While the party is the instrument for realizing the people's will, the party's policies must therefore come from the people and reflect the will and ideas of the people. Okay, so what they're saying here is that the people have to be satisfied with the outcome. Ideally, people wouldn't have to focus too much time and effort on the governance of the country because that is the government's job. They should just be satisfied with the end results. And we see that they are satisfied with the end results. I mean, what matters more? Is it the fact that you have, it's just the matter of they are more satisfied with their form of governance. And in the West, even though they have voting for things like the president, we see that it doesn't work. You have the current president, his son is being charged for various crimes, and the prior president is currently being charged with crimes as well. And so neither of these are particularly good candidates, but you had the choice to vote for these people. Whereas in China, you do have the chance to vote at more the local level, but the most senior politicians are also the most experienced and the most qualified for the position. And they end up getting the position. And so people like Donald Trump, people like Joe Biden would not get the presidential position in a place like China. Next, let's see where this ends. Next, the party is the highest form of political leadership in China. It is the backbone of the people, while the people are its followers. The dialectical relationship between the people and the party is the essence of China's people's democracy. The realization of popular sovereignty in China lies precisely in this constant and close interaction between the people and the party. Chinese-style democracy is a closed, tripartite system of public opinion, democracy, and the people's livelihood. Okay, so they're saying they have to care about public opinion, they have to care about people being able to participate, such as in the form of a democracy, and they have to work to improve the people's livelihood. And we see through many quantitative measures that China is actually able to do that. It is similar to the process of making Chinese hot pot. I have no idea what any of that stuff is. I'm not a good cook, so I'll just take their word for it on hot pot. Please let me know in the comment section if they're wrong about hot pot. So I have no idea. Public opinion is like the very, they're going to go into a lot of detail about hot pot now. Okay, so I'm going to learn about it. Public opinion is like the various condiments thrown into the hot pot. Democratic process is the process of cooking the hot pot. And finally, since democracy must solve the problems associated with people's livelihoods, this hot pot must be brought out and served for everyone to enjoy. This is true democracy. So the major policies in China, including those from the recently concluded 2 sessions, comprise a large number of issues relating to people's livelihoods. And when we go out to various places to conduct research and investigate, we see that every year the government has a list of practical matters relating to people's livelihood that needs to be dealt with. Okay, so let's go back a second here. Okay, I'm just trying to find... Okay, so here's the tripartite form. So we're just going to talk about this for a second. Where is it? Transfer. All right, I'm just going to find it. Tripart. Okay, there it is. Okay, so let's see how America does compared to China on these 3 metrics. In terms of public opinion, Pretty much every politician in the West right now has higher disapproval than approval rating, while in China, the politicians have higher approval than disapproval rating. They have like 90% approval rating based off of Western polling data, anonymous polling data. So this is very credible polling data. So in terms of public opinion, Chinese democracy is pretty definitively better than Western democracy, at the very least in the current moment. In terms of democratic system, the way of voting, it seems like the Western system is just not working. I mean, look at the types of people, look at the output, look at the outcome. We're getting people like Donald Trump, we're getting people like Joe Biden as the highest leaders of office in the United States. And so the form of democracy just isn't working. And then the government should focus on improving the people's livelihood. Well, if you look at people's optimism for the future and how much they're making, America's losing their middle class. The West is just despairing that their children are going to have worse futures than they've had. People aren't even going to have children because they can't afford to live, let alone afford to take care of another human being. People aren't getting married anymore because they can't afford it. They can't afford to start a family. They can't afford to have one income for the family. I mean, it's just across the board, people's livelihood is definitively getting worse in America, and by every metric that I can tell, is getting better in China. And so, if you're looking at this tripartite system, we can pretty substantively say that the Chinese system is better than the American system. And I would love to hear your opinions in the comment section, because the people who have been dismissive of the Chinese system and negative towards places like Russia and China, I would love to see what substantive facts you have to back that up, because from everything I could see, the Chinese system is definitively better than the Western system. Okay, so we have one more section after this video that we're going to go over. And we see they're going to talk about the chaos and disorder, divide and conquer model of the West, which is stoking divisions, versus the harmonious society consensus building of places like China, where they try to put together win-win situations for themselves and for other people. And so, interesting, because this is going to tell us how each government functions and why these two countries could really never get along, and why China has just kind of given up on communicating, interacting with the West, because the West has to defeat China at this point. Like, that's their entire system is based around defeating China. It's around stoking divisions. And so they can't have a Chinese harmonious society. And so we're going to see more about that next time. I think that might even be like the best video in this series. So I think you should stick with us, because that's a very interesting topic. And if you don't understand why these two countries are not going to ever get along, this section, I believe, is going to inform you about that. It's based off of how these countries derive their success. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more content from me, we're constantly innovating, constantly doing new things. Please subscribe to our channel. If you have any questions, comments, critiques, or concerns, I do always read them. Please put them in the comment box below. I can't guarantee that I'll get back to you, but I do have a list of people that I plan on getting back to. If it's a very in-depth, thoughtful comment, I'll give it the time it deserves, the recognition it deserves, and try to ponder it and get back to you with my thoughts on it. I love reading the comments. I'm glad that we're getting so many returning viewers. It's a very exciting time for this channel. So thanks for sticking with me, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.